In February 2006, exactly 14 years ago, 20 people went before the Joint Committee on Health and Children at the Oireachtas, the Irish government. They presented on masts and how ill the mobile phone masts had made them. For 10 or 15 years, these people had been suffering to the point a lot of them could not stay in their house. They had to stay in caravans or wherever they could in remote places. But then another mast would pop up, they'd feel it and they'd have to move on. So they were basically homeless, going back to the 90s, early 90s. So much for an Ireland for all, because not only was this problem never dealt with, it's grown exponentially. There's a lot more people now. And to make it worse, the gigabit society means there's no more remote places going to be available. Where are these people supposed to go? So let's take a look. The delegation was led by Con Colbert, a very important name in Irish history, coincidentally. Very significant for this entire situation. The 20 people, some of the symptoms they had: sleep problems, could not sleep in their own home, inability to concentrate, pins and needles, fatigue, very unwell, stabbing pain, palpitations, shocks, all sorts of brain issues. The masts were at distances anything from 35 metres to 1.5 kilometres. Now, all of those symptoms, the TDs were saying, "Oh, never heard of it before," and "Oh, that's terrible. Oh, let's bring the surgeon down in the hospital, see what he knows." Now, they're in the research, going back decades and decades. There are top EMF scientists out there who are talking about this all the time, but our government hadn't a clue where to go when 20 people came up and says we've nowhere to live in our own country in 2006. And that same government who hadn't a clue then didn't do anything about it. And now they're rolling out 5G. Where is Con Colbert and his 20 people and all the other people? Because 3 to 5% of the population, conservative estimate, has this sensitivity to radiation. And the masts are going up a lot closer now than 35 metres. The small cells in cities will be maybe 5 metres outside your bedroom. There will be blanket radiation with 5G. There's 53,000 satellites going up. They want broadband everywhere, even in the forest, at the seaside. No escape. That's the big thing about it. No choice, no escape. This digital society, gigabit society, that we never got to vote in. So let's see what happened with this presentation. If you read through it, it's alarming to see that councillors did a bit of research and considered that their research was the bottom line. They weren't qualified, they didn't know who to contact, who to talk. Well, fair dues if they research, but they can't just be the final word on anything. You'll find that a lot of the ministers put it back on the people who were ill to explain their illness and to have the answers. They had no idea where to go to find answers. Well, those answers are there today, and I can tell you, whoever has replaced all these ministers is in the exact same position. They're not listening. You tell them where to find the answers. They would prefer to have the masts, quite honestly. So back here now, we can see in 2006, 20 people swept under the carpet. Here's the question that was asked, and this needs to be answered. Has research been carried out in Ireland to discover the extent of the problem? I'm going to show you now that question that was asked in 2006, it's a very important question, was asked again in October 2019. It's a question that has been answered. Why are they not listening to the answers? I'll show you in Roscommon County Council this question being asked in 2019, and I can tell you, fighting 5G for a year and having a background in this and knowing who the experts are and knowing how to prove this with the tests that people can take for their health, I can tell you that there's people ill out there not getting help in every county in Ireland, in every country in the world, and they're just swept under the carpet. So an Ireland for all and a gigabit society cannot happen unless you're willing to sacrifice these people. There's no point pretending they don't exist, because they do, we do, and more are going to become sensitive. So this could be you tomorrow. And this is the government that you have voted in and are on the verge of voting in again tomorrow. Buyer beware.
Certainly in Athlone, there's probably one of the biggest masts in the country, and there's a large number of residential properties quite close to the mast in Athlone, and I was just wondering, was there ever a survey done of Athlone town just to see had that an effect on the people living close to it, or was there any health implications out of that? And just on those 2 points, if you could clarify.
On data, like, you know, Ireland doesn't do research on electromagnetic field exposure levels because we have too small a population. We have a population density that is a quarter of the UK or Germany and Netherlands, and these are the countries with high levels of exposure and with sufficient people in order to do the testing.
So there you've had a man being asked a direct question. Has a survey been done? And the answer he gave was very confusing. He said, Ireland's not big enough. We've had 20 people appear in a delegation before the Dáil in 2006. And to say Ireland is not big enough, it's like he's talking about something different completely. He's faced with 20 people. The question is, 14 years later, a very obvious question. It was at the time I showed you, and it is now a very obvious question, with everybody at the councillors saying, please stop 5G, we're sensitive. Councillors are getting hundreds and thousands of people saying, don't go ahead with 5G because we're sensitive to the radiation. So when John Naughton, Councillor Naughton, put the question, has there been a survey done around Athlone, the biggest mast in the country? The answer was, Ireland's not big enough. So, chalk and cheese. What's going on here? Firstly, that's a straw man argument. When somebody answers you with something that's not actually the topic, they are getting out of answering the question. So don't go down that particular rabbit hole. A straw man is a form of argument, an informal fallacy based on giving the impression of refuting an opponent's argument while actually refuting an argument that was not presented by that opponent. See, it's ridiculous. Ireland's not big enough. And then he goes on, you see. I cut him off there, but he goes on and on to say why Ireland's not big enough and why they're not doing surveys. And the bottom line is he's an engineer who works for the regulator, the telecom people. And he's saying, we don't believe this radiation can harm you. Therefore, if you're harmed, you're not harmed. It's ridiculous. So you just got to look at the fact 20 people have been suffering for 15 years. Thousands and thousands of people are now telling their councillors, telling their TDs, and I'm one of them. Don't go ahead with forced blanket radiation because we can't handle it. And then the scientists, the top scientists in the world, also saying that. You've got the space appeal, the 5G spaceappeal.org. You've got another scientist appeal, 5gappeal.eu. You've got emfcall.org. That's saying the scientists having a vote of no confidence in the telecom regulator. I mean, the fox is in charge of the hen house. You don't get telecom to make the rules. Another example would be letters by medical doctors, public health experts to schools on wireless. That's the new problem. You're getting kids who are sensitive to Wi-Fi in schools, and they were told not to put it in. 2011, Council of Europe told them, don't go ahead with Wi-Fi, get wired internet. And not listening. A lot of kids getting ill, and they're just saying, oh no, it's not possible. It's not very scientific to ignore evidence. Really, it's not. So how things have changed at all would be independent experts can tell you now there are reliable disease biomarkers characterizing and identifying electrohypersensitivity and multiple chemical sensitivity. So there's no point big industries and captured agencies, people who are corrupt, who are working for industry telling you this doesn't exist, because look at all the tests. Each one of these stars is a test, okay? A test that your doctor should be running, but you don't even need a doctor to do these tests. You can go to a big lab like Genova Diagnostics and you can get even more tests, because all the tests for concussion apply to actually EHS and MCS. And so there are chronic inflammatory states, oxidative stress, mitochondrial damage. They look at their measuring histamine in the blood, nitrotyrosine, a marker of peroxynitrite, and then opening of the blood-brain barrier, which is present in all of these conditions. Oxidative stress there. There's all these little tests, you know. So at the time, 2006, even today, actually, if If you're not prepared and you go into a doctor's office saying you have these symptoms, they'll say it's in your head, because in fact actually Richard Bruton is sending a document to doctors to tell them not to tie the symptoms to EMF. Even if you had an antenna parked over your head, as some apartments now do, or a smart meter at the other side of your wall, and you get sick, they'll just say point blank, this is not EMF. But you can prove it. You absolutely can take these tests before 5G is switched on, anytime during it. And you can see how you are performing, your body is performing. And there's other tests as well. Just, this is a little glimpse, little snapshot to say you can prove things. If somebody's saying it doesn't exist, they've got a weak hand of cards now. And this guy, Belpom, he's one of the top guys, you know. One of the top guys in this. So these are the leaflets I ran to raise awareness on 5G because obviously a lot of people are trying to censor it. The industry has big pockets, deep purses. Anyway, 8 county councils in Ireland have voted to stop 5G, but the CEO is pushing it out. He's not listening. There's no democracy at all. The issues involved privacy, security, biodiversity, climate, because climate, carbon emissions, the masts and the data centres are using more electricity and more carbon emissions than everybody else, and yet we're all told to cut back, and we're all taxed. No, telecom are the carbon hubs. Anything wireless has to go to a mast, and that has to use gigantic size electricity. Biodiversity, well, the bees, the birds, magnetoreception, Oxford, Bristol. These are the universities studying this, and in Germany. And even the beekeepers themselves. They know that the radiation harms insects, bees, birds. Security and privacy can all be hacked. The smart meter is a very foolish idea to have a smart grid. Privacy, a lot of our devices are actually spying on us. You get to accept it over time. They're even bringing in lights. The CCTV are all reporting back. It's ridiculous. So the LED street lights, there's admission of harm on them from the American Medical Association. They had a working group, and they said there's at least 3 major problems, and they wanted councils. They gave advice to councils, which councils haven't even heard of. 4 years back, the advice was that the glare is actually dangerous for drivers. It's harmful for the retina, and it's causing, in estates, all these lights are causing too high a level of light that the people can't switch off. Their natural mechanism, their circadian rhythm is no longer working. It's going to lead to melatonin issues, cancer issues. And that's from the American Medical Association. Smart meters, an admission of harm 2010 by the utilities companies in America. Their emails were accidentally got on a Freedom of Information request, where they were discussing with each other, what do we do with the people who get injured from these things? And their conclusion was, keep it quiet, let it get rolled out, and then when they get harmed, let them put in a note to their doctor and we'll get it removed. When they get harmed, that's assault, that's criminal. And the other thing is, we have in our country of Ireland, the communications minister telling doctors not to issue the notes. So that's how silly it is. That's ridiculous. Silly is a mild word for it. Masts, proven harm. Yes, the studies are there. And like I showed you, the tests to show your health, you can monitor your health now. Wi-Fi, yes, Professor Martin Paul, Professor of Biochemistry, Basic Medical Sciences, he has done a paper on Wi-Fi, but he's not the only one, you know. Phones. The City of Berkeley have just won the right to know that the telecom companies there now have to label their phones with their own safety instructions, not with anything new. They actually hid the fact that phones are tested here, not here, and yet you're led to believe you can use them here. They're actually in breach of their own guidelines, their own safety limits by putting the phone here. And then of course the scientists are saying, well, those guidelines were ridiculously high anyway, you know. You shouldn't really be using wireless phones at all except in an emergency. And radiation from devices, your Wi-Fi router, your smart everything, they're just as bad as the masts. I suppose the only difference is you can switch them off. With a mast you never can. And then 5G, well, Senator Blumenthal in America got the 5G guys to admit there's no test. But if you look, I have the video up, I have the transcript for the talk. The Tom Wheeler, chairman of the FCC, when he launched 5G in 2016, said they're not interested in studies. They don't want to wait. Let the technology drive the policy, not the policy drive the technology. We are not waiting for governments. You should hear the disdain in his voice when he says that. Regulators, committees, and the length of time they take, stay out of the way of technology. And he said it like a Roman emperor. And bear in mind, that guy wrote 3 books on war tactics for telecom as a business model. So we've got the scientist appeals, like I said, 5gspaceappeal.org, 5gappeal.eu, emfcall.org, and now the astronomers are appealing because there's 53,000 satellites, there's only 9,000 stars visible, and we can't see them anymore. So you're the ones about to vote in the same government that created this mess. They haven't a clue, they shake your hand, they smile at you, and that is not a qualification for government, okay? There's one guy out there on the circuit I've seen is worth voting in for sure. James Conway. Go for it, guys.
Communities are being forced to accept masts they don't want. The group says this proves commercial interests are number 1, while public health is number 2. Carol Coleman, RTE News, Dublin.
This is an article from 1999. It's in the Irish Times Online. Gardaí have called for no further telephone antennae to be situated on radio masts in Garda stations and for an independent inquiry into possible health side effects from microwave radiation. This independent inquiry is something that has been sought 20 years later. It never happened then in 1999, and it didn't happen since. In fact, the government have been blocking an independent inquiry. They are just siding with the telecom on this, the Fox, the henhouse scenario. That's why I ran in the GE20 general election, because if you can't get the government to do something, you have to think about becoming the government, don't you? And at least getting the message out there. When you have to sit shoulder to shoulder with these guys at hustings and present them, you end up presenting them with evidence that they've just refused to listen to when they're in power. Now, Garda Hugh Corrigan of Wexford was one of the guards. Wexford Garda Station. There's a politician going by my window now. She's not going to do much for us. She didn't before. Garda Hugh Corrigan of Wexford said, the government are not listening to the thousands of ordinary people campaigning against these masts. This is 1999. And phone companies placing these masts near where people live and work. Well, with 5G, there's going to be a lot more of that. In the state, it is the state's duty to defend personal and property rights of every citizen. Yeah, 20 years later it still is, but you've got to realise it's not been happening. These people were sacrificed. The Gardaí wanted their masts, they were getting big money for it. When I say the Gardaí, the guys at the top who makes the decisions, but not the Garda on the ground. The Garda authorities as an agent of the state are failing in this duty. Garda authorities. You actually have 3 Garda stations, Hugh Corrigan of Wexford, you had Garda Peter Kelly from Ronanstown and Garda Morris Johnston from Cork. 3 Garda stations spoke out about the mass in 1999. And why? Because here we have in Ronanstown, 3 officers had contracted cancer and 1 had died. It was a cancer cluster. It's very obvious when a mass goes up, and they'll try and tell you it's all your imagination. Garda, falling on them. I've come across 2 cancer clusters in 2020 when I was on the election trail. 2. First 2 places I visited, and you see it all over the world. Look at the documentary called Full Signal and see what was happening in 2010 all over the world. So just don't expect them to do anything different. You keep voting in the same guys. It's up to you, the people. There was unanimous backing for a motion calling for no further telecommunications on antennae on stations and for an independent survey of the effects of emissions. Well, that was 1999. It never happened. And sadly, there's county councils out there now running with this same emotion. The same motion. Stop it, and we want, an independent survey. Yeah. Okay. But we've got to take it further than that, because if they asked for that 21 years ago, and you're asking for that the same way today, maybe look at not doing it the exact same way, because we don't have another 21 years of this. These antennae are now on hotels, they're on houses, they're on churches, they're on schools, everywhere. And they never got safer. No, they got more powerful, actually, more harmful. And the fire stations in America in 2004 managed to get the antennae off their roofs. 6 particular firemen in one station all had brain damage. It was, you do the right tests, you get the right results. Those tests have not been done here. I tried to track down Garda Hugh Corrigan to see how he was getting on, and I got this, a cheque being presented to his wife, because he's now dead a couple of years, with the very same cancer that Tetra people were getting, you know, esophageal cancer. Very long, slow battle. So it got him in the end. He asked all the right questions. What he said is what we say today. The government are not listening to the thousands of ordinary people campaigning against these masts. It is the state's duty to defend personal and property rights of every citizen. That's our constitution. The Garda authorities were failing. Everybody's failing. They swept him under the carpet. They're sweeping anybody who comes down ill under the carpet. And today, that's the antennae outside Boyle Garda Station. All the Garda stations have these, but they're not the only ones. Schools have them, supermarkets have them, and now 5G means they're connecting your milk bottle, the baby's nappy, everything's connected to that mast and sending these signals and that radiation. They want more and more masts for that.